All right. Hello, everyone, and good morning here from the Pacific Northwest. And wherever you are in the world, I just want to send out a warm welcome. And this is my favorite day of the week when we get to go live and I really get to feel your vibe. And then we really get to put that vibe out into the world for all those who are going to be watching the replay. We have loads of you coming on today. We have a huge international community. We're all just continuing to gather and hold the focus. As I always say, we're stronger together than we ever were apart. So hello from Maryland and Vancouver Island, and hello from Lake Stevens in Utah. I'm going to be in Utah in September, and the UK, and I think I saw Belgium. I've kind of been going through and touching base at the Okanagan and Florida and Ontario and on and on and on. So that's awesome. So you are really going to want to hear this that's going to be happening in the next 3 months. So we're going to pay attention. And how this all started was I was meditating, and then I hear the voice that, from the spirit world that will prompt me and ask me this question. And the question was asked, well, so Nancy, what's your story behind your story? So that's how it started. So it kind of piqued my interest. And I'm like, well, what do you mean my story behind my story? And they said, well, whatever story you have, there's a story behind that. So then what is that story? And so then I said, okay, I'll play. And then it was after that, I would tell the story. And then what's the story behind that? And then what's the story behind that? And what's the story? So the spirit world was really speaking in riddles. So that's what my whole topic's going to be about. So have you ever had a feeling that there's more to your story than you might realize? These subtle knowings of your behavior patterns, of the way that you walk through relationships in your life, the things that hold you back, your patterns, your past, your path might only just be part of your truth. Have you ever really thought about that? So as the blue light frequencies continue to dissolve illusion and distortions in your life, many of us are beginning to sense that there's a story that we've been living, only a partial story, and it's not clearly the full picture. And so today I'm going to talk you through seeing what I see energetically in the field right now, what July, August, and September are big, potent, powerful months about really setting the stage for deeper self-revelations, and why uncovering the truth beneath your truth, uncovering the story beneath your story brings you closer to actual real peace inside. Does that sound exciting? You're like, yeah, but is it going to be a lot of work? So I'm going to see if I can bring it to you in simple terms. We're going to have a meditation like we always do, and we're just going to practice. We're going to practice and practice. So if you've been feeling disoriented, emotional, or like something big is trying and attempting to change, then this is exactly what we're talking about today. Hello from New York City and Australia and Manila. Hello, and North Dakota. So, okay. So what is the story behind the story? So I've got my notes here. So let me just start about the blue light. The blue light frequency, the blue light plasma, the blue light codes, sacred geometry, all that is still happening. It's working in the background. And what I've really thought about, maybe the story behind that story or the messaging around that, none of it has changed since the blue beings of light first came to visit me in 2017 with an invitation to go to China to get the prophecy. So that was about 8 years ago. So it's always this blue frequency is all about clarity and truth. So that's ultimate. That's the ultimate goal that the blue light's always going for. It's going to hone in on you, and it's going to go clarity and truth, clarity and truth, clarity and truth. And so whatever is not that story, or whatever causes distortions in what you may feel is your truth, well, hang on to your bootstraps, because here in July and August and September of 2025 and beyond, so even if you're watching this 4 years from now, we are still in this revelationary process of uncovering ourselves. And so it's going to require your conscious attention. It's going to require that. You're basically being called by your own soul to stand up, pay attention. What is your story behind your story? And you can write that on a little Post-it note and slip it in your back pocket. And every time you find yourself cycling in your story, you're going to whip that out and say, what's the story behind the story? But I'm going to see if I can help you kind of navigate that system. Because this is what I teach in my classes that I have. It's like, all right, let's get that stability. You got the stability. Now let's start really allowing these multidimensional stories to unfold. So as the blue light continues to stream into our collective field, illusions dissolve, deeper truths begin to glow with clarity. With every wave of illumination, this activation enhances a greater inner knowing inside of you. And suddenly, everywhere you turn, you notice there's a story behind the story. And not just in you, but there's always a story behind someone else's story as well. So maybe you're at the grocery store, for example, and the cashier is snappish at every customer. You could take her at face value. And what would be that face value? Wow, she's grumpy. Wow, I want to go get in a different line. Wow, maybe I should report her to the manager because she's not being very nice, right? So we can imagine our thoughts about that, saying, wow, she's being really rude. I can't believe she just said that to someone. And then, but you could feel, if you went beyond face value, that maybe she's having a bad day. Maybe you can feel something different. Like, what's her story behind her story? Maybe she had a sleepless night of taking care of a sick elderly parent. Maybe she's deeply lonely. And in that loneliness, she goes, I don't need anybody. I don't need anybody. And she just purposefully pushes people away just so that she doesn't have to touch her own pain. And then there's just that inherited weight of survival that we're all living through right now on this earth. And these aren't just personal reactions. This is about becoming a frequency attuned to dimensional depths of life. So here we are now in July, August, and September. We're in this pressure portal. Now, we definitely have the Lion's Gate that's coming up in August. We definitely had the portal of the 7, 7, and 25 equals another 7. Those are mild compared to this big, we'll say subtle buildup of pressure. And it's not the kind of pressure like a vice type pressure. It's a type of pressure that the Sangomas in South Africa, they have a word, but it means pressed. I'm feeling pressed. I'm feeling pressed by my spirit to gain greater clarity in this moment. So it's this compelled, like your spirit is compelling you to put your head up, pay attention, snap to attention, and get that greater clarity. That's not your story. What's the story behind your story? All right. So this isn't just about personal reactions. And so in July to September, there's pressure portals that are buried stories that are rising to the surface. They're rising to the surface. So that's what we're talking about. You need to hear this about the next 3 months. And then from October to February is when you're going to move into energetic integration. So I always have this saying that I would rather go into something with my eyes wide open and conscious and ready to handle anything that I'm faced with rather than the 2 by 4 effect. And I've had the 2 by 4 effect in my life where I didn't listen to the little voices, the little intuitive voices. And then it's like, wham, I ended up in the hospital really sick. And so it was like, all right, spirit was trying to get my attention. Spirit didn't make me sick, but there were things going on inside. Maybe, maybe I would call them an inner destructiveness. Like I had inner destructiveness going on that I wasn't paying attention to. I was hurting and harming myself with lack of consciousness about how I really felt about things. So I'd love to hear from you if you can relate to that in the comment section. So October to February, we move in energetic integration into a healing season, a soothing season, like recovering after a soul level surgery. So, if this is true, how would you live differently in the next 3 months? So, if you know that these next 3 months is about you revealing any distortions, any illusions that are getting uncovered by the blue light, it's like it's just the blue light's just rinsing off the surface. It's like an archaeologist. Oh, what am I seeing being revealed under this layer of dirt? And then slowly brushing it off to say, oh, there's another layer. And just like in an archaeological dig site, sometimes you don't know what you're seeing on the surface, but as you just start gently moving away the dirt around it, you start getting the bigger picture. This is what's happening in the next 3 months. So, again, the question was, and Spirit asked me this, how would you live your life differently right now if you really knew that there was a story going on behind the story? And if you really knew that there would be a big healing time coming up? So, I have my own answers to that. So some of us are already experiencing rapid integration. Are you one of those that you know you are rapidly integrating with everything that's being revealed? Others still loop behind those tight story bands. So I remember maybe it was about 2 months ago, the blue beings of light. I want to try to grab hold of what they said. It had something similar to do with this. Let me just read what I wrote again. The story bands. Oh, I can't get it because it's really good. All right, if it comes up again, I'm going to ask them, bring it back to me if it needs to be said. So we're kind of suffocating under this, oh, I remember, I can't because you did. So this is what the blue beings of light and my other spirit guides said. They said, we're entering a phase of eliminating and dissolving that pattern of I can't because you did. So what does that mean for you? Well, I can't be confident because I had a really hard upbringing. I can't be this because you did that. It's like, I can't feel good about myself because you called me names, or how about the famous one, which is very true, which should not be taken lightly, is the bulliness that happens in the world. I am this way because I was bullied. So all those are valid, but now we're being asked, okay, if that's the story, then what's the story behind that story? And it does sound like a riddle, like, show me a riddle. It's like a riddle, but I'm going to clarify all of this. So, okay, let's see here. So Spirit reminds me there's always more to the outcome. There's always more layers to the story. And many of our stories didn't start with you. Many of your stories didn't start with you. They began with an ancestral memory. So this is where we're going. And yes, Krista, it's about false belief systems. However, there's a core. It may feel like a false, we may know when we have a belief system, we don't know it's false. We feel like to the death it's the truth. This is exactly what you're talking about, Krista, is that Spirit is saying, okay, so then what's behind that story? If it's true, then what's behind that story? So many of our stories started as an ancestral memory, a karmic contract, or a soul blueprint of what you came in to work on. We aren't just feeling our pain, we're metabolizing generational frequencies. This is the invitation that the blue light brings, not just for clarity, but responsibility. So, what if your work over the next 3 months to 6 months is to become your own story keeper? Not one who holds on to the pain of the stories, but the one who brings the light of the stories to the surface to be seen, honored, and transmuted. And we're being asked to do that, but it makes it sound like we have a choice. So these revelations of the story are coming to the surface, and you're being invited to be more conscious about it. So when a story rises, you want to pause, you want to sit with it. You want to ask, what's beneath this? Who else has lived this? Is this mine? Did I inherit this? Did I agree? Because often we think about in the spirit world is, did I agree to take this on? All right, and I have a story about that. And then you would follow your spirit when it says, nope, there's another layer here. You get that intuitive sense. There's another layer here. So before I start talking about stories behind stories, I want to share a story with you. Hello from Texas. Oh, interesting. Jenny saying Byron Katie, who I'm not familiar with. I don't listen to a lot of teachers because I like to get my information on the inside, but I love to hear when other teachers are saying, who would you be if you without that story? I love that approach as well. Thank you for sharing that, Jenny. Okay. So when I was in South Africa, when I was living in South Africa, and I went to see a Sangoma. So it was really one of my first times. I think I went to have a bones reading. My mother was visiting. That's the only reason, because you can't just go to South Africa and get a bones reading. It's like the stars have to align, the ancestors have to align. If they don't want to be found, or if it's not your right time to find them, you won't find them. So, but my mother comes to visit me in South Africa, and I said, is there anything you thought about doing? And she said, yeah, I want a bones reading. So with the Sangoma, which I had not heard of before. The bottom line is, so we find these Sangomas, and we go to visit. My mother gets her bones reading. My daughter's with me. She gets her bones reading. I get my bones reading. But in my bones reading, they said, you have an ancestor of a grandmother that's coming through, and she's asking you to take on the responsibility of her life's path. And I'm like, okay, I don't remember this grandmother. I didn't grow up with this grandmother. And they said she's in a wheelchair and she wants you. And she ended up in a wheelchair because she didn't walk her own path. And so she lost the use of her legs. This is what they told me. And I'm like, I don't I don't know a grandmother that was in a wheelchair or anything like that. Like it just didn't connect. And I'm a psychic. I know what it's like when I have a client that can't connect with the information that's coming in. All right. So afterwards, my mother and my daughter and I, we go to have lunch in South Africa, and we're sharing about our bones readings. And I shared this, and my mother said, "Oh, that was your grandmother Grace. That was your birth father's mother. And yes, she spent the latter part of her years in a wheelchair." And I said, "Well, she came through and she wants me to add her path that she didn't complete to my path." And I'm like, "What's up with that?" So how would you think about that if you had an ancestor that said, "I have these burdens, or I have these responsibilities, or I have these gifts, will you agree to take that on and add it to your list, your awakening list in your lifetime?" So of course I wasn't too keen on the idea from a human perspective, but I came home, and this is what the Sangoma told me. I had come back to the United States, and the Sangoma said, "You need to have an ancestral dinner, a meal. So you prepare the meal, and you're going to invite this grandmother to the table." So then you would serve up the food. There's candles. So I'm now welcoming this grandmother in. And then after the meal and the dessert and everything, and I take the plates that were hers and I place them kind of on this little altar with candles. I want to honor her life. And so then I just went into meditation, had that conversation, and it really was about um, she didn't have the confidence. And back then in the South, it's like, no, you couldn't open up to your psychic gifts or your intuitive gifts. You couldn't say that you had visions. You couldn't say that you could talk to God or the spirit world. You couldn't do all that. Somehow she made me aware of that the time that she lived in, it was palpable what wanted to come to the surface, her story, her real story, that she's intuitive and she's sensitive, couldn't come to the surface at that time. The bottom line was I agreed that I would add her gifts to my gifts. And then it's like the wheelchair dissolved. It's like she became very light and bright, and she was able to heal from that agreement. So I made this agreement with her. And so that was her story behind her story. And that was the story behind some of my stories. And how would you do if you were on this other side? Kind of think about you in the spirit world, and you carry some things with you that you wish you had accomplished or you had shared. How would you want somebody? Are you a team? Are you and your ancestors a team? So here's some stories behind stories. So this story is behind reactivity to authority. How many of you have authority issues? A lot of people have authority issues. As a matter of fact, we're seeing authority issues play out on the world stage right now. Okay. I think I was just using my inside voice on the outside. Okay. On the surface story, I get instantly reactive when someone speaks to me with authority. I feel small. I feel angry. I even feel rebellious. What's the story behind that story? At a past job, a manager micromanaged and humiliated me in front of everybody else. And before that, that story behind that story is a school teacher punished me for asking too many questions. And before that, I had a parent who dominated with rules and ultimate control. And then behind that, an ancestor may have lived under a rigid regime of military, religious, or patriarchal trauma, having no choice, no voice, and that was passed down to me. Okay? It's a story behind the story. So is it really your story, or does it have its roots far back? So, all right, how about this other example, the story behind feeling unworthy of love? All right, so the surface story that you may be saying is, I always feel like I have to earn love. I give and give and give, and it never feels like enough, and it never comes back to me. Is there anybody that feels like you have over care, concern, love for others, but it seems like when you need something, there's nothing available to you? So, what's the story behind the story? So, in July and August and September, there's this extra flow of blue light dissolving illusions and distortions. So, I always feel like I have to earn love. So, what's the story behind the story? I had a romantic partner who withdrew affection when I had needs. Before that, the story behind that is a parent only gave praise when I achieved something. Now, what's the story behind that? A sibling outshined you and was the favored one. And what's the story behind that? A lineage of women who stayed in marriages where love was transactional or where worth was tied to service and sacrifice. So, these there's multi dimensions to every story. This is what is being illuminated. There are multi dimensions to every story. So the one story that you may be telling yourself over and over again, it can be very true in that moment, but you're being invited to explore. But what if that's not the only truth? And this is what's happening with the blue frequency over the next 3 months. So, and then the root frequency that you learn is that love is a condition, not a birthright. And the pattern isn't about needing more love. It's about unwinding the lie to prove that you're lovable, right? You're unwinding that. Okay, I have another story behind a story example. Example number 3, the story behind I don't belong. Now, this is a big one. This is one that I'm hearing a lot. So here's your pretend story. I walk into groups and I instantly feel like I don't belong, like I'm on the outside. How many of you feel that way? So here's the potential story behind that story. You were excluded from cliques at school. I know that one. Earlier, your family dynamics made you the black sheep. All right. I know that story. Your ancestors, if you go deeper, the stories behind the stories, your ancestors were immigrants, displaced people, exiled tribes, or mystics who had to hide their truth. Kind of like what I said my ancestor grandmother, Grace, said. I couldn't really walk my truth because it wasn't societally accepted. I would have been an outcast. Their energy still whispers to you, your ancestors, in this story behind the story. Be careful, you don't belong here. Don't be seen, hide yourself. And so the root frequency that you might be carrying that threads all of those dimensional stories together is exile. And your nervous system isn't reacting to modern social settings. It's reacting and echoing a cellular memory as if it's life or death, as if it's danger. And you're like, wow, why did I react like that? That just, I always say the punishment doesn't match the crime. It's like my reaction doesn't match just going to, a baby shower, and all of a sudden I felt triggered and I had to leave, right? So these are what we are being asked to do. Here's another story behind emotional numbness. Your story is, I feel numb. I'm not sad. I'm not happy. I don't really feel anything. I know that one. And the story behind the story is you were taught not to express emotions. So that's your story. And earlier, grief went unspoken in your family. We didn't do emotions. I mean, how many of you say that in your about your family? We just don't do emotions. I wasn't taught about emotions. I was taught more about intellect. That's your story. But what's the story behind that story? So generations back, an ancestor may have suffered a catastrophic loss. And this is true. All For most of us here on this earth at this time, we have ancestors, recent ancestors between now and 7 generations back that have suffered catastrophic loss, war, famine, or betrayal, and ended up shutting down their emotional bodies so that they could survive. And that template was passed down to you. So that thread, that root frequency, the emotional shutdown as a protection, you're numb, may be a soul's pause between waves of your awakening, that you may just need to rest as that whole ancestral line, that you might have agreed to take that on and heal it through your own energy system. And so your body may be telling you, we're not safe. It's not safe to feel. And then now maybe it is. And so that can require you saying, okay, my story is it's not safe to feel, but we're going to change that story by looking at the story behind the story. All right. How about the story behind procrastination? That one's coming up big time, big time. I have a dream. I know what to do, but I keep procrastinating and I keep self-sabotaging. How many of you have done that? So what's the story behind the story? I tried once and I failed, and the shame of it all really stung. So that might be your story. It's like, yeah, I had a big dream before. I tried it before. It didn't work out. I looked like a total failure. I'm not going to put myself out there again. That's the surface story. But maybe earlier, someone belittled your creativity when you were young. Okay, that's a story behind the story. And it's true. Like those events happened are true, but they're not your only story. So now maybe you had an ancestor that was highly talented and highly gifted, but they were punished for it. Maybe a seer or a healer or a teacher whose truth was feared. You inherited the cellular memory that visibility equals danger. Now, I've been to different countries where it is believed that any form of artwork is evil, any form of singing or performance or anything like that. Like, you should be seen but not heard. And that can come back from in those Puritan forms. Like, where do those Puritan beliefs in certain religious cultures come from? What was the story behind that story? So if you say, well, I have a Puritan background in my ancestors, so that's why I tend to be quiet and isolated. But what's the story of your ancestors who were Puritans? What's their story behind their story? And so why am I belaboring this? Because this next 3 months, July, August, and September, are going to be pretty intense as it's pushing up the stories. And so the root of that is just around procrastination, right? I mean, how many of you beat yourself up around procrastination? Or it's like, there I went, self-sabotaging myself again. But when you start dusting off, brushing off the layers, and when you get down to the core truth, and as Kirsten was saying, the belief systems that are false, and you're like, oh, I'm not in danger anymore. I'm not in war anymore. I have the freedom to feel. And then that's the ultimate truth that gets illuminated. What happens to you on the inside? Suddenly you feel freer. You feel freer to be you. So, and it's like it's encoded in your memory. If I rise, I could be destroyed. See, that's a belief system. It feels so true in this moment. And then it's not true if you follow the thread back. When I was in South Africa, and then I had the calling to become a traditional medicine person myself, it was that intensity of feeling, because I was going to be, they were going to be drumming and dancing and singing songs. And I had never been that kind of out there in a big crowd with all that attention on me as I was going through my training and graduation. And there was this intense where I felt terrified and I felt fear. And I followed the story behind the story and realized I had an ancestor that either you hide or you die, right? You hide or you die. And so I was able to unravel that. And then I was able to feel better about kind of being at the center of this training. So we're going to do a meditation. And in this meditation, I want you to just take into the meditation one story that you tell yourself. So we're going to, and try to keep it fairly light, especially maybe you've got some intense stories in the background. Let yourself practice on some lighter ones before maybe you visit that. So how about, like, I'm not a good cook. I'm not a good dancer. I've got 2 left feet. It can be, nobody hears me. Whenever I talk, somebody interrupts me. So all of those things we're going to, as Warrior Girl says, yes, that hide or die can go back to caveman times, and it can. All right. So Heather, I'm going to teach you a little meditation, and you're going to pretend like the story is like a piece of cloth or something. You're going to drop it, and there's going to be another cloth, like a tapestry of story, and you're going to drop that. And then what's the tapestry of story? So as a nurse, as a registered nurse who's been working with the human energy field for 30 years, who's done thousands of readings, this is what I find is helpful. Don't go into that old pain. You're going to stay light, open-hearted, light-minded. You're only the observer, like you're watching a movie or you're watching an image, but you're not a part of the image. Don't go down the rabbit hole. Only later. So let's go ahead and close your eyes, and I'm going to guide you through a little technique that is very light, very introductory, but you can make a whole line of work around this. And my students often are taught how to do this. So close your eyes, turn within, and just have a little chat for a moment with your body and say, hey, I know our story, but we're going to go on a little treasure hunt. We're going to go on a little exploration. And as you breathe in and out, you want to let your body know that as you allow the next story to come to the surface and be revealed, that it's not happening to your body, and you will just let your body know what today's date is, what your current age is. Because sometimes your body can feel the frequency of an ancestral experience and think it's real. So it's just one story that you tell yourself all the time. We're going to just take in one story. And maybe it's a story that you live by that causes you to feel stuck about yourself. And again, it can be as simple as, I'm not a good cook. So it stops you, you're stuck from trying to cook. And let's get you well grounded first. So talk to your spirit and ask your spirit to help you to have an experience so that you know the healing work you're doing in this meditation is real. Ask your spirit to bring crystal clear clarity to your feelings as they rise. What if you may hear sounds or voices around other stories? Bring clarity to sight or clarity to knowing. And then just ask your spirit for an image to really help you ground your energy field, because as you're dropping the old stories, it needs to have a drain to be released or can float up to the ethers. So do you want to use your grounding as a tree with deep roots or a waterfall or a rainbow? Maybe your grounding is going to be falling leaves. Maybe it's going to be a bear or a mountain. Whatever is a support, a grounded support, as you allow the story behind your story to reveal itself. And then extend and invite your grounding to settle around the area of your hips, passing through the floor beneath you, passing through the foundation. Maybe you're in a car or in a park. It's going to pass through the earth's crust, just like a hot knife could just drift right through cold butter. That energy of your grounding just easily and effortlessly passes through underground streams and stones and crystals, tree roots, mycelium, lava. There you go. Just let it go. Let your grounding drive deeply to the center of the earth and then anchor yourself at the magnetic core. And then imagine that you're tapping into blue earth energy. Earth energy supports you by detoxing some of these old stories. It helps dissolve, dissipate, vaporize these old stories, old energies, and then the residual drains down your grounding. So right now, pretend and imagine that there's this blue earth energy coming up from the earth into the room where you are, and allow this blue earth frequency to flow up through your feet, your ankles, your knees, your hips, up into your body as far as is comfortable in your body. And then imagine it tips right over like a waterfall. That blue earth is going to flow right down your grounding to the center of the earth again. So there's a circuit that's created as the blue comes up through your legs into the lower part of your body. Then it cascades all the way back down to the center of the earth. I can hear some of you say, I don't think I know what I'm doing. Your spirit always knows what it's doing. So just play along. And now let's bring in some blue. Invite the blue light frequency that's available to the whole earth right now. It dissolves illusion and distortions. And it's going to help us just uncover the stories behind the stories to get to that inner peace and ultimate clarity of truth. So let's just bring that blue frequency, just let it flow down through the top of your aura, the top of your head. Let it just really saturate your whole field, and then let it just continue on draining down your grounding. The blue frequency also pulls you strongly into the present moment. It pulls your consciousness out of the past, out of the future. You're fully in this present moment as you are going to observe your stories behind your stories. Now create an environment in your imagination. It can be a chamber of clarity and truth around your story. It can be a forest area where you want to sit in the amongst of a grove of redwood trees. And maybe you wish to sit on the beach by the ocean. So create a safe place for you to feel really settled within yourself, even if it's in the safety of the room where you are now. Take just a moment to create that space of clarity and truth. And now in front of you, so it may be 10 feet out, 20 feet out, it's this very luminous panel. It can be gold or silver or blue. It can look like a flat screen TV. It can look like an ancient papyrus scroll. It can be cloth, whatever you wish this to be, so that it can help contain and hold the story the story of you before we get to the story behind the story. And just your story that you're entering in this meditation with, let it illuminate out in front of you. And where do you feel it and sense it in your body? And what is the truth that you tell yourself about this story or that you believe? And now allow the blue light frequency that can dissolve illusions and distortions to flow through that. That story is going to just dissolve, dissipate, vaporize, drain down your grounding. And now, what's the story behind your original story? Again, I find it easiest to imagine a big screen TV for me, but it can also be, again, illuminated on so many things, whatever works for you. And you may not see the story, but you'll feel the story, you'll hear the story, you know the story. So, what is the story behind that story? And then allow the blue light to come through, dissolve that one, let it flow down your grounding, and then get the story behind that story. Where do you feel it in your body? What do you know about that truth? And then when you're ready, allow the blue light to rinse it again. And then what's that story behind your original story? And then does it go back to your ancestors? And if it does, what is that story? So rinse with the blue, get the story, pause, become conscious, alert, awake, sensitive. Know the story, honor the story, respect the story. Allow that blue to continue to rinse through your aura, to rinse through the story. And we're just going to do one more. What's the story behind that story? And let yourself know, I am willing to know my story behind my story. If you find that there are still multi dimensions of stories behind the story and you didn't get to the root, just know that you can always revisit that again later and complete this process. And thank your spirit for showing you the story behind the story, even if you don't know what it means, that's okay. And then come fully present back into the room where you are. tune in. How do you feel now versus how you felt when you were sitting with the first story? Are you noticing an enhanced sense of inner peace? Or maybe it still feels a little unsettled because there's more stories to be revealed. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes and look around the room and settle yourself. And Darlene, you're saying you feel heavy, so release the heaviness down. You're grounding, but you may also feel heavy because you may have come further down into your body as you release the story behind the story, and you're actually feeling the weight of your body, and that should feel good. But if it's a heaviness that feels burdened, it's the simplicity of it is release it right down your grounding. So in the closing reflections, you are not broken. Your story is unfolding. You are the keeper of all of your sacred truths. You are called now to honor the depths, the multidimensional depths of your story. And remember, you're not carrying it alone, but you are transmuting it, alchemizing it into pure light. The world needs your clarity, my clarity, our clarity, more now than we ever have before. And so just know July, August, September is a real press time of it coming to the surface. And so let yourself take those moments of time, of peace-filled moments, to gently look at the story behind the story, bring in more peace, and then knowing that after the 3 months, you'll be integrating more of that understanding of your truest self at those deep, still points of peace. All right, take care, everyone. We had a long call today, almost went a full hour. Thank you so much for hanging in there, and I cannot wait to hear your story behind your story that you experienced today. All right, everyone, take care.